Hey guys, welcome back to The Binger. If it's one thing we can't get enough of, it's the supernatural. If it's witchy, vampy, or haunted, we're into it quicker than you can scream. Over the years, we've seen some incredible shows and movies creep their way onto our screens. While we love to watch the stories unfold, we're huge fans of the epic fights too. Why use guns when you can use otherworldly powers, right? Join us as we take a look at some truly epic showdowns. Henry Cavill's hotly anticipated series The Witcher didn't disappoint. In fact, it went in hard with the first episode, which set an impressive standard. Many viewers hail the show as the next Game of Thrones. It certainly has the same dark aesthetic, but the supernatural isn't as prominent in Game of Thrones as it is in The Witcher. Sure, there are strong elements of it, but not in quite the same way. In the very first episode, Geralt is approached by a sorcerer to do away with a woman he claims is evil to the core. At first glance, Renfri looks like your average beautiful bar-dwelling girl, complete with cloak and dagger, but she has her own agenda. After a brief tryst with Geralt, she tries to persuade him to join her side, but he politely declines. When we say politely decline, we mean taking out her entire team of bandits with some insane moves. They don't teach swordmanship like that in King Arthur's court. There's magic afoot. Geralt slams through them all like they're just pieces of paper, before stabbing Renfri through the throat with her own blade. The thanks he gets from the sorcerer is banishment and a public stoning. Things don't exactly get easier for the White Wolf as the series unfolds. But that's what makes it so great. We could do an entire video on the Witcher battles alone, and honestly, it would make for compelling viewing. Is there anything that Henry Cavill can't do? This guy's made for action roles. Stranger Things has raised the bar for the entire supernatural genre since it hit our screens in 2016. It made instant stars out of its young cast, but more importantly, it messed with our minds. That's the mark of a good show, when it sticks in your brain long after you've watched. There have been many awesome fight scenes, most of which center around Eleven. The character is played superbly by British actress Millie Bobby Brown, who can wear a nosebleed better than most of us. In Season 3, bad boy lifeguard Billy gets sort of possessed by the Mind Flayer who uses other humans to do its bidding. When the gang gets wind of that, they know they have to stop Billy somehow, so decide to lock him in the sauna at the changing room. They think the heat might force the Mind Flayer to come out, like it did when Will was sick. Sadly, they underestimate the power of this insane creature. Billy manages to smash through the door and confront the kids. Eleven, being the badass she is, stands in front of her friends and tries to protect them. In a show of strength against a backdrop of flickering lights, she uses her powers to slam Billy against the wall with some weights. It's an incredibly eerie scene that fits the overall tone of the season very well. It's really touch and go as to who's going to come out on top, but Eleven pushes through in the end. Literally, she shoves Billy through a concrete wall. When we heard Sabrina the Teenage Witch was getting a reboot, we were a little skeptical. Let's face it, the original show was brilliantly perfect in its own way and a true testament to its era. However, the reboot absolutely flipped the script and created something entirely new. Melissa Joan Hart is extremely religious, so something tells us she probably didn't like this devilish premise much at all. Kiernan Shipka plays a character vastly different from the finger-pointing spellman of the 90s, and we dig it wholeheartedly. Our witch battles constantly between the path of night and the path of light, but the Dark Lord has already chosen her several times. It's clear he's obsessed with her. In one Season 2 episode, Sabrina goes ham on a bunch of angels who are busy cleansing students. When she tries to stop them, they shoot her down with a bunch of arrows, and it looks like she's toast. That is, until she becomes the living embodiment of Satan himself and slays them all. It's a brutal sequence that looks terrifying, as Sabrina levitates and sets the angels on fire. Magically, all the people the angels cleansed come back to life too. On a scale of 1 to unholy, this scene totally stole the show and taught us all that you really don't mess with a spellman. Especially one that has friends in high, or should we say low places. It's not gonna end well. When Stephen King says a TV show is the closest thing to genius he's ever seen, you sit up and take notice. Considering he's one of the biggest writers in his field, his opinion matters. Audiences echoed his sentiments as The Haunting of Hill House really is just that good. Shirley Jackson's novel of the same name has been reworked a few times in the past. 1999's The Haunting, starring Catherine Zeta-Jones and Liam Neeson, gave it the old college try. But it doesn't come close to this Netflix original. While it can be argued there aren't any real fight scenes in the general sense, the series is all about inner battles and psychological ones with the ghosts of Hill House. Poor Nell seems to take everything the hardest, and eventually she loses her fight. In the 5th episode, she returns to the house and is guided up to a balcony where she takes her own life. She believes that her husband is waiting for her on the other side, but it's all an illusion. Fans of the series were utterly devastated when this scene played out. And for good reason. Fight scenes don't always have to be crossing swords and mortal wounds. It can be about mental battles of the wills, too. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do so, and don't forget to turn notifications on. We all know how pesky YouTube can be. If you're watching on mobile, you can do this by going into YouTube settings. Now, on with the show. NBC's Midnight Texas came straight from the books by True Blood author Charlaine Harris. Given the success that True Blood had on the small screen, fans were excited to see another adaptation. Sadly, it was short-lived, surviving for just 2 seasons before it was axed. Showrunners certainly packed a lot in during that time, though. Lead character Manfred has the ability to talk to ghosts, which often lands him in hot water. During the first season, he comes up against an extremely powerful and dark entity. The streets are littered with exploding cars as the demon walks toward the mortal. He's promptly skewered by an angel, but that doesn't help. Vampire Lem gives Manfred a helping hand by giving him a powerful artifact that he sucks the power out of. All of a sudden, Manfred has bleeding eyes and bright light shooting out of his hands that teaches this demon a lesson. The evildoer is turned into a pile of ash hotter than the midday Texas sun, and all is right with the world once more. Well, when we say right, we mean it's back to the everyday threat of the supernatural. Fans were rightly disappointed when the show was scrapped, as there was so much more left to explore. Midnight Texas had all the elements necessary to be a hit series, and felt like something new and fresh. Sadly, executives read the numbers and didn't see what the rest of us saw. You can't win them all, apparently. Let's throw it all the way back to 1994 with this entry. Anne Rice has a skill for creating creepy stories that is unparalleled. The best-selling author gifted us with the wonder Louise de Pointe-du-Lac. As vampires go, Louise isn't half bad. Played spectacularly by Brad Pitt in Interview with a Vampire, Louise made it clear to us that not all bloodsuckers are bad.
I will not take her life.
Some of them are just down on their luck. For an immortal, he has more than his fair share of woe. There are many spectacular moments in the movie, like Lestat's dance with his dinner, but the most powerful is Louis's revenge. Lestat tells the powerful nest of theater-dwelling vamps that Claudia tried to off him. As it's a crime, they lock Louis away and let Claudia and her companion meet the sun as punishment. Louis is devastated that his little friend met such a fate, and when he's released, he takes it upon himself to exact justice. When the nest is sleeping, he pours petrol over the coffins and sets the entire place on fire. As the vamps spring from their slumber, he cuts them to pieces with a scythe. He comes up against one in particular and splits him in 2. It's no wonder that Pitt's so famous. His performance was utterly phenomenal. They don't make vampire movies like this anymore, and more's the pity. All right. There are few things positive about the Twilight franchise. We know that we're older and wiser than we were a few years ago and less enamored by shiny diamond torsos. However, to give the movies their due, there were some very well choreographed fight scenes. Edward's scuffle with James at the end of the first movie is notable. But we're here to talk about one showdown in particular. By the last movie in the saga, Bella and Edward are married and against the odds have a baby, while Bella is also now a vampire herself. Most people take a gap year and go traveling before college, but not this gal. The Volturis soon find out about the antics and aren't very well pleased, so a war is on the cards. Against a rather dramatic backdrop of snow-covered hills, the Cullens and their band of allies, including Jacob and the rest of the wolves, face off against Aro. Cinemagoers were up in arms when this movie premiered. Carlisle was ripped limb from limb by the cape-wearing vampire and set on fire. Jasper was slaughtered and the entire landscape was littered with bodies. Fans couldn't cope, with some standing up and walking out altogether, but then it turned out to simply be one of Alice's visions. They duped us! Still, it was a great fast-paced sequence that proved vampires really are as bad as each other in the power stakes. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is the ultimate queen of the supernatural, reigning supreme for most of the 90s into the early 2000s. In her day, the Slayer went up against many foes that could all find worthy places on this list, from man-made Frankenstein-like creations to one of history's most prolific creatures of the night. Yep, it's the man himself, Dracula. In this episode from Season 5, Buffy becomes completely enamored with the vampire, despite his awful dress sense. We all know that Dracula is ridiculously charismatic and can assert mind control over his victims. Turns out even the Slayer wasn't immune. It looks like Buffy may be lost to the dark side forever, but at the last second she gets a vision from the original Slayer. After regaining her senses, she tackles him and does what she does best, turns him to dust. It may not be the most awe-inspiring battle sequence ever, but given the immense power of her foe, we couldn't leave this one out. You just don't get any better than Dracula. The guy's literally been practicing for centuries. The Vampire Diaries may have finished some time ago, but it's still one of the most popular shows of its kind. Ghosts, witches, vampires, demons, this show has it in spades. It also features a huge romantic element which greatly appealed to its teen audience. In the very first episode, Stefan is reunited with his brother Damon, who is just bad to the bone at this point. There's plenty of atmosphere, including a particularly menacing crow. Lest we forget Ian Somerhalder's cheekbones, which are so sharp they're weapons in themselves. After the custom chit-chat and back and forth, the pair finally come to blows. It's sibling rivalry at its finest, before Stefan finally loses his cool and propels his brother through the window. While that's certainly an impressive visual, this battle is really about the power play between the Salvatores. Damon and Stefan spend a lot of time taking verbal jabs at one another. It serves to set the series up for the uber-dramatic events that continue. Plus, there's a serious undertone that tells viewers Damon is holding back and is way more powerful than we're seeing. It's all about the tension, baby. And this isn't the only time that the brothers come up against each other. They have more arguments than rivaling politicians over the show's 8 seasons. Mainly over their shared love of Elena and the whole good versus evil thing. It's hard being an ancient teenage vampire in this modern age. Before Bill Skarsgård was giving us all the creeps as Pennywise the Dancing Clown in the It reboot, he was playing Roman Godfrey in Hemlock Grove. The actor certainly knows how to work the horror niche, that's for sure. Roman is everything that you think a vampire should be. He's self-obsessed, he likes the nighttime, prefers a cup of O-negative to a bud, and is best friends with a werewolf, Peter. The series was complex, and nothing was black and white, which is why fans adored it so much. Sadly, love can't keep a show on the air, and it was eventually canceled after 3 seasons. Writers did do a fairly decent job of tying up loose ends before it was scrapped forever, though. Roman got his just desserts after Peter, who ends up his mortal enemy, shows up to his house and rips him to shreds. Roman initially puts up a good fight, but is distracted by an apparition in the background. That leaves the door open for his friend to prove that canines aren't always a vamp's best friend. There's a spectacular crescendo of glass as Roman gets shoved through a window. Peter chows down on his buddy's neck, making a meal out of the evil-doing vamp. Let's hark back to a time before Marvel Studios had created an empire with the MCU. Back in '98, Wesley Snipes was living it up as one of the best characters of all time. Half human, half vampire, Blade. While the actor no longer holds the role and it's been passed on to Mahershala Ali, Snipes did the Daywalker proud. The first outing was in 1998. Focusing on the battle between our hero and all-around bad guy vamp Deacon Frost, the story amped up to epic proportions. Frost is played by Stephen Dorff, who was still riding high as one of the most in-demand talents at the time. There are some very notable fight scenes in this movie, including the very first one. As the movie opens, Blade lays waste to a vampire nightclub. However, it's the final head-to-head with Frost that really takes the cake. By this point, Frost has the power of the Blood God at his disposal, making him incredibly strong. Blade even slices the dude in half and chops off his hand, but the guy snaps back together like he's made out of putty. How do you defeat an uber vamp? Well, with several syringes full of EDTA, a substance that explodes when it comes into contact with the vampire blood. Cue a very messy ending to Frost's life, and presumably a gigantic cleaning bill. Inspiring. True Blood was such a perfect show that we often find ourselves weeping over the fact it's no longer with us. It can be a cruel world. Still, at least we have 7 seasons of awesomeness to look back on. Eric and Bill have some brilliant fight scenes between them, but Werewolf Alcide isn't to be overlooked either. Generally, Alcide is one of the nicer wolves in town and doesn't seem to be as bloodthirsty as the rest of the pack. He always tries to do the right thing. In the 12th episode of Season 5, he challenges pack leader JD and shows that he's able to throw down with the best of them. Although he has taken some powerful vampire blood to help him claim the throne, which could be seen as cheating, Alcide wins out by snapping JD's neck in one swift move, making him the werewolf to end all werewolves. Who doesn't like a good old-fashioned whooping in the woods? The rest of the pack stands back and watch as it all unfolds, before swiftly falling in line behind their new leader. Do you have a favorite? Sound off in the comments. We love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.